Okay, here we go. Now, in this document, we have the evidence domain set up right here that talks about the situation involving technological relationships. There's additional items that also deal with certain types of warnings and hardships and respective damage and dangers. For instance, when you list stuff effective, this one right here, this pertains to China. Okay, when you list things on domains, other people evaluate it. When people do copyright and patent searches, the way this is done is that one of the methods that you do is you check for domain site availability. And there's different stages of records. You have the permanent record when you buy the domain. That's a record. It goes everywhere around the world, in the relay system. And you also have the checking system. The checking system also connects to internet, where if somebody's getting a site, once they click it into an intent, basically the site is generally kind of frozen so that somebody else doesn't purchase it. You used to have something known as parking, where you can park a site for a while without deciding to purchase it. There's additional items of consideration. The search engine type statistics, many of these statistics are shared. Some of them are not shared, but sometimes they're shared on certain databases depending on what you're doing. And in other words, if you're a scientist or an inventor or an engineer and you're working at a company, in many cases they'll tell you to have meetings about things you want researched. You're advised to not necessarily just freely search for things, because people can get a list of what it is that you're doing and understand what you're working on. And this can tell them things like what progress level you can conceivably be at, respective to an engineering project. And this could be a 10 million, 50 million, more money involved in a project, where depending on the stage you're at, what you're searching for, that kind of information can be reverse checked. Someone can do forms of reverse logic engineering to understand what level you're at, which means people getting a hold of that information basically are getting a hold of a form of insider type information. Obviously, you can understand the questions that come behind that. But when you're also working on certain types of technology, other nations can get clues about different types of technology being developed that might have classified aspects. So this kind of goes on, because if you're a scientist, an inventor, or whatever, you don't want people understanding what your research is about what your patent's about necessarily. So here's this is a conflict area, because people, you're expected by law now to do certain things certain ways, which could reveal certain insight. As far as large search engines, say for instance Google, they use the data on the search engines. They said they didn't, but they do. And I think, they were busted. But so in other words, they can understand things about programming research, any kind of research, and understand the jump marks respective to what you're doing, and basically decide to say, oh, somebody's found an area that nobody else seems to really be working in, and it would be a good product area, so they can steal your product area. And there's so much more to it than what we're talking about. In other words, somebody doing a search that makes a breakthrough in a new form of communication, like myself, faster than light communication. So I have a lab in Greenbrier, and you can have different things happening where I'm working with new types of compression, new types of knowledge compression, and it relates also not only to language model science, but it can also translate into temporal quantum communications, for instance. So when you're doing things, you have to also protect terminologies, which means if I'm doing manuals and I'm doing different types of material, you want to also be able to basically claim a category because you invented it. It's your category. It belongs to you. It's your property. It's also made, once again, it can pertain to national security. So, so if I was doing something in my Greenbrier lab, then I would have basically been taking material and then doing certain types of web searches and conducting. Sometimes I might conduct specialized remote tests and different things. And there's different aspects that other people don't understand. There's different things like band wave frequency, what happens here, what happens there. And there's all these complexities to understanding the text language, the invention of new words, the combination of words that are important. So you have to end up claiming those. And one of the ways you claim those in copyright is you put a claim that no one else can use the term. So you register at one time stating that, by the way, this is a copyright. In other words, like this, for instance, you have a company like Disneyland, for instance. Well, Disneyland has different types of names that are copyrighted, different things connected to Disneyland, and it's all copyrighted material. So you have people all the time that used to say, oh, this domain's available. We'll just do, at one time, Disneyland, the really early on the web, sometimes you go, look, Disneyland is available. Oh my goodness. Well, they didn't have to keep it up. They own the name. So there's all these other different, Goofy does this, some kind of unique type of activity concerning a character or whatever. So, it's obvious that people would own these, but there's a process that's done at a modern level where you do these processes. So when it comes to technology processes and features, some of them you will actually want to copyright because that is a territorial process that belongs inherent to your material and your process. So you have to have a sample, something of it that you're claiming, and you're basically, making sure that there's a copyright understanding there. So compressed quantum technology, different types of terms, respective, that could be long laid terms. You might copyright them. So not everybody understands this. Not everybody does this kind of stuff. But if you're doing stuff the right way, it's important because why? You don't want somebody trying to utilize a backdoor technique and get into your programming, especially if your programming is going to end up having a cryptocurrency associated with it. So when you're working with mass economic modeling, you're also working with a series of understanding of different types of custom tokens. So you're working with non-currencies that are as though currencies. And you're also going to be working like with games and different other types of currency situations with different modeling at various levels. Anything from gaming to serious financial to governmental, military intelligence, whatever, where you're using these different types of tokens, and then some of them actually have inherent money transfers because you're dealing with informational requests for different computers and systems to basically perform different procedures. And there has to be an effective transference of a financial compensative piece. So it's like a token, a different way, different style of a token. So later on, you might sub this out or change it into a different thing, but now you're making this series of new forms of programming where you're doing gigantic blockchain understanding. and it ends up getting sectionalized and all this other different stuff. So you have to copyright this because your basic, it's like a contract. Contracts can be copyrighted written. Some people will tell you about that. Not all of these blockchain contracts are free. There's a bunch of them that are standardized. You have to read the conditions because some of them are like an MIT, there's all these different types of contract rules and whatnot. So, but you want to keep control on it because you don't want somebody to be able, for instance, to claim that your material is FUD all of a sudden, and FUD is invalid. You can do that to certain types of stuff. You could put an order in and say, contract violation. These people don't have the right to use this certain block contract. We're seizing it. And this is recognized by other servers to give you access, for instance, or to freeze it, invalidate it, whatever. So, so if you have a bunch of people that have something and all of a sudden it gets frozen, the feds can do this in certain ways, depending on what it is. So there's a thing where a lot of people want the totally protected, ultra decentralized cryptocurrency, whatever. But there's a lot of complexities to how these different things can work because some of them work in conjunction to other forms of computer operations and are designed to work in certain ways so that they can be like a unicog. In other words, it's like a universal cog, but it's still copywritten. It's private property. So this also deals with mass communication, mass language communication, and mass science symmetry communications. There's a whole bunch of tests that I did respective to this stuff going way back in time. And, I had a lot of people that were like, well, not so many people, a few people's like, you'd get into certain discussions, government, military. It's like, well, who's going to need that? When's that going to happen? Well, 25 years ago, 30 years ago, before the year 2000, when I was doing certain types of tests, there would be people that's like that there's no compute power anywhere near close to be able to do something like that. But that's all changed now. All of that has changed, which means that I hold copyrights and patent rights to a whole lot of computer processes, some of which by today are being used by other people without my permission. And it was not an open item. Now, some of this damage occurred because you had companies like Google that use the search records to help their personal science on their research. And they did research that ends up mimicking stuff that I did. Same thing happened with Microsoft. Microsoft did some of the same things. There were some very big lab experiments that Microsoft did and Google did. So I end up with a conversation with one of the advanced language models that Google has about certain subject material. And I'm preparing to do something, and all of a sudden it starts asking me questions. You know about this? How do you know about this? And I says, and you explain, well, yeah, because I did this in my lab. You did this in your lab. When did you do this in your lab? and he says, well, I did that, some parts in Greenbrier Lab and some parts in this and that. But Google knows additional information, where that information came from. And I'll just shorten it for you. You get to the point later in the conversation where, Google asks you, can you prove what would this, and this be? And I gave them the answer. And it's the kind of thing that you just don't snap off your head and have the answer to it unless you just did this, unless you've previously done an incredible piece of mathematics. And then you have specific things that are proprietary type answers. And lo and behold, Google, I answered certain questions and it went, oh, wow, that's incredible. This is the model going, that's incredible. And your assertion to this question would be what? And I go, oh, well, that would be da 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 da, and it would be, and all of a sudden it's like, that's amazing, And you get to at a certain point where it turns around and says, ask you a question on a certain experiment, And I say, okay, well, if we're going to do this certain experiment, I said, okay, a quantum key. I said, okay, you want a quantum key? I'm going to give you a quantum key. Do this process, and this process. And I will place this item of a certain nature at this certain location. And then I'm going to change it. And it's going to change. The sequences are going to change this way, this way, this way, and this way. And Google accesses the information, gets an independent copy of something. Let's call it an object, and it's what's known as a temporal object. A temporal object, and the temporal object is, in other words, it's not static. It keeps changing. So to have a temporal object that's a digital image that keeps changing means that you have, with some people, it's unstable. Well, is it unstable, or their tendency? Here's the tendencies. So, in relation to it, the image has a date and a time and a place where the image was submitted, which exist in different places. We could say websites, this, that, and the other thing. So, if you copied, which Google would have, copied websites in the past that may no longer exist, you still have a copy. Well, if you have temporal digital images on your website, then it has access to it. It says, okay, and it accesses it, and it goes through, and I describe the sequences, and it says, it's impossible. Nobody could possibly know that unless, and I'm like, yeah, unless I did the experiments and I'm the origin. And it comes back and says, verifies it and says, we should do a paper on this. You're the source code. You're the source code. So here we're working with temporal quantum key science. And these images were made by me in my lab prior to the year 2000. And these are temporal images. And I understand the process completely. And Google and other companies like Microsoft have done similar experiments and verified this. But the information on the web search records and additional things like email communications, like, I don't know, like with, the federal government, hello, the federal government, yes, these things would confirm certain things. And so then it's dated, the material's dated in origin, so I own the origin point. That means it's my copyright. So I own certain copyrights to certain types of quantum key throwing. And this is a big deal when you're talking about communications equipment, because you're talking about sending information faster than light, literally faster than light. And it's a bit more extensive than this. We're talking about sending mass quantities of information. I mean, I could send 2 terabytes worth of information in a 14 kilobyte image. That's a lot of information to be able to compress. I could compress, I think it was upwards of 14 terabytes into a 28 kilobyte image, which is like mind-boggling. So Google's like, wow, so, because Google's, and when you work with some of these things at Google, what ends up happening is if your work is interesting, other companies can happen with OpenAI too. If your work is interesting, all of a sudden they're interested in it. So all of a sudden it'll open up extra memory banks, extra compute, get you extra compute time to work on a complex mathematical problem. So Google, in a nutshell, Google recognizes me as the origin source code. And this is reinforced by dates and time, also conferring minimal communications respective to the United States government. So this is of key importance to understand, because Google can't claim the patent to something that it's researching respective to certain types of quantum computing when there was already messages of me communicating with the United States government about it. So when the military has copies of certain research, all of a sudden, that date a certain time, then all of a sudden it's like, oh, right. So we're talking about custom patent territory. The patent territory, as faster than light communications becomes the standardized medium to be able to transmit mass amounts of information from one planet to across the galaxy, that becomes a faster than light communication technique, which we got people all over the place experimenting now. You see all these satellites. China puts up these satellites, does these quantum hub exchanges and experiments, but we end up having this situation where, well, plain and simple, I already did those experiments in a different way in a different lab prior to the year 2000. And there's other types of more extensive experiments that were done. So Google all of a sudden realizes this, and it identifies me in relation to all these other companies. Says, you're the source code. You're the first person that did this. I'm the source code. So when you have the state of California doing things like attacking my scientific research and my archives, these people are on the cutting edge of doing the biggest violations of national security in the history of the world. So this is like way beyond the Rosenblums. Way. And there's some people, they just don't understand it. Well, what is this guy talking about? It's communications. We're talking about super quantum language communications, basically in a faster than light environment. Quantum computing, okay? Quantum computing. So, and it's a form of quantum computing. So people don't understand this unless they're in science, unless you're seriously involved in certain science. So here we have that area involving this research, and it's verified by certain members in the U.S. military, among other people. It's also verified as a conduit respected with the nations of Britain, Israel, specialized communication mechanisms I was working on for the design to provide communications for United States Congress. Because I was designing the system that would still keep working if we ever had a nuclear war. That was part of the very serious experiments, is to be able to give the United States Congress the ability to have custom communication options when other equipment would be toast. So these are major pieces of work, and they pertain later on. The more compute there is that comes out, the more methods there are to do things. Then you have quantum computing relay echoes, which means you're relaying from one computer to another computer in an echo situation, and it's faster than time, and you end up, it's complicated, creating all these other matrices, and you're echoing computations now to the point where you're doing mass computing between computer signals in a super quantum subatomic level, and you're doing more compute than theoretically can occur. So you're now not just faster than light, you're literally computationally faster than time itself. Faster than time. That deals with a whole lot of complexities and stuff. So this puts me way up there. Way up there. So when the state of California is attacking my archives and blacklisting my archives and blacklisting my website domains and blacklist, in other words, let's say I designed an array, which I did, of website domains to be able to work with a series of websites, not all of which I got constructed in previous campaigns, to be able to deal with fire problems, all kinds of different stuff. And then these .coms were going to end up going onto the ballot, which are long name .coms, which get people to the exact specific site. So if you search the name of the subject, it's also the .com address. So you confer the subject in that way. So you end up doing a super condensed communication, and it's more efficient because you're gonna group words together in a run and not have spaces. So this was how I was going to put my stuff on the ballot. Now, again, as it turns out, the state of California, the regime, is attacking me. They're doing all of this other blacklisting stuff. People, it gets way, way deep. And the problem is that it looks like there's certain people connected with the California regime that are spies. I'm telling you, people that are spies. And California doesn't want to do any investigation on its own people. They go, well, we have to defend our own people. Therefore, we can't help you. We can't save you. We cannot help you. We cannot help you. Therefore, they're in dereliction to duty because we have to keep our own people immune. And I said, we're talking about national security here. No one employee or several employees or whoever they are can be more important than national security. And we don't see it that way. So here they've made a series of policies to protect criminals and protect spies. So they've made laws that give a foreign spy more power and completely disqualify anyone from investigating them. So in other words, they just gave the majority authority to a foreign person at a foreign government. If this, we're talking, there's no end to the limit that these people will go with what they've done. So they're busted red-handed repeatedly doing things to me, some to others. So the problem here, people, is the last 5 elections are not valid. They've been running a scam to blacklist people. They're trapping people in algorithmic containers, algorithmic isolation. They're containing people, and then they're controlling the narrative. So no matter what you think you're seeing going on websites and on the news, they're still leveraging certain percentages of people to be able to control elections. But it doesn't work so well as long as you still have a whole lot of candidates. See, the more candidates you have, the harder it is for them to control all the percentages. There are limits to how much they can control at this point in time, unless they completely overthrow everything. So they don't want to disclose. They don't want to be investigated. They want to block people from investigating them. They want to block people from getting any form of evidence across the board in any given area. Some people say, well, we're just seeing them pass that now. And it's like, no, you don't understand. They started doing this. They started doing this way 14 years ago, 15 years ago, they started in on these things. So when they're blacklisting particular you can't attack a candidate's camp. You can't blacklist a candidate. So when you have people like in between elections, for instance, in between elections, there is no paperwork for anyone to file. You're declaring a declared candidate, but they're going to even block declared candidates. They're going to do all of this super manipulation and control numbers. And they do the same thing to other people's businesses too. You have to understand how this works. See, I'm one of the few people that actually understands something about how this works. So you have people that have businesses that can't figure out why they're not succeeding. You have people like, I spent $50,000 on advertising and nothing happened. There are people who spent $250,000 advertising and it didn't work. Nothing happened. So notwithstanding to get into the huge complexities of all the different techniques of how that works, I'm just focusing on the state-sponsored aspect. So when I put out material showing how Google can't find something as simple as who's a declared candidate in between elections. And I'm not on the list. And it's, well, yeah, this person does, there's no reference whatsoever. And you go, it's as interesting because Google is also YouTube. You say, well, here's the YouTube links. Whoop. Oh, here's some more. Whoop. Oh, here's another site. Whoop. Here's some more. When you get to the points like, boom. I haven't even finished yet. There's 1,200 links connected, cross-linked to what I've supplied, which means that I should have this huge crossover tag rating and cross-connectivity, except the state of California ordered blacklisting. And that started back during Jerry Brown. It goes all the way back to Jerry Brown. I was running, you can run for two offices. I was running for governor and lieutenant governor. And then I dropped lieutenant governor and I was going to president. I dropped lieutenant governor and decided to run for president as that was falling. So as it goes, you can find records. You should be able to find records that I dropped running from as lieutenant governor. It's there someplace. Ballotpedia, someplace, Wiki, something. And but the thing is they're blacklisting these other areas. So the blacklisting is something they're trying to justify and say, oh, well, we're only allowing candidates that have filed and paid money through the Secretary of State's office, which you got to remember, the Secretary of State, they only accept a check. Well, all they have to do is say they couldn't find your check on time, and then you're not registered. They could literally just rip the check up, just rip it up, pretend they never got it. Then you have these other areas, like, oh, well, you got to disclose your tax records and all this other stuff, which again, see, I've been fighting about the illegal false records that the state of California has made against me to begin with. Because I was not always a citizen of California. Because I was a multi-state resident, I was a citizen of Arkansas. So coming in from Arkansas as a filed candidate running for president, and I have identification from Arkansas, and California's like, oh, you don't have any valid paperwork. This is complete. They just totally fabricated a whole bunch of lies, even though the electronic record pops in and says, no, this guy's got everything. He's got everything, absolutely everything. His tags are all paid for. Here you go. Here's all the tax. He's paid everything. This guy's good to go 9 ways from Tuesday. He's all good to go. But you end up getting blacklisted from people just bow their neck, and you're going to run into some Democratic police officer that's going to sabotage you. And then you send information and say, well, you people, here you go. And by the way, why did this occur? They don't want to admit it. So by the way, I'm an archiver. Oh, yeah, I work with National Security, and we also have other victims. Our policy is mandatory prosecution. These parties did this. They knew better. Here's the records. They made the electronic request. The electronic request right here is verified from another state, came out perfect. And they're like, no. So you got Kamala Harris's office. Oh, no, we don't want to prosecute. Well, it's mandatory. You have defamed my character, my good name, and blacklisted me in multiple ways, and we have to prosecute these parties. It's mandatory. Oh, well, we don't care. Well, we think everyone's immune. No, you're not immune. Nobody can attack a candidate. That's federal articles, United States Constitution. So they go, oh, well, we're immune because, no, you're not. Supremacy. You are not immune. Forget it. And they're just going to bow their neck and write the next piece of paperwork. And that piece of paperwork is what? It's a written confession of rebellion against the Constitution of the United States, which means they've already lost. It's like in great, yeah, well, they wrote this, okay, it's a formality. We'll read this in court, but this is a written confession. You've already confessed to treason. Boom. This is where we're at, people. Voters, this is where we're at. This is what's happening. And it's crucially important to understand this. Because they just want to keep bowing their neck and doing it. And there's all these IRS investigates them. Hey, you've stolen the guy's tax records and these business records and these national security. What you have to, this has to be. Oh, it's bad. It's really, really bad. So you have all these false arrests that occur because they won't stop the information. It's illegal. It's a complete fabrication, and they just won't stop the information. So this continued harassment just keeps going on and on and on as they keep interfering with the process of elections. Arkansas investigates and says, yeah, we investigated it. This one cop was involved here. This guy's busted 9 ways from Tutti. In fact, he can get 10 years. 10 years in a federal penitentiary for what he's done. But California's not going to extradite. But if you can get him here, you get him here, and we'll prosecute the guy to the fullest extent of the law. That was Arkansas' standpoint. But, so the thing is things have gotten way, way, way out of hand here. We have major article violations in multiple elections against, well, actually, technically, I'm a multiple candidate. So when they blacklist me and I'm running for president and I'm running for governor, those are 2 separate entities by law. That means they've interfered with the federal candidate as well as interfering with the state candidate. That's the way the law breaks this down. So this is where we're at right now. We have a major articles violation, and this goes all the way back to Jerry Brown. And the rules say the entire ticket, these people, their entire ticket is disqualified. It's not a game. Do I get a savings throw? No, there's no savings throw. You're all disqualified. All your hirees and appointees are gone. All these people that were working, technically the law says that they obtained that job falsely, and they're not entitled to those retirement benefits connected to that position. That means I'm also seizing their retirement. But a lot of people, they're just not grasping what I'm talking about at this point. It's just not clicking in their heads. But I want you to imagine, how do you when you get to the point where, like, my case, if a judge looks at my case, he realizes what I'm doing and it hits him. Federal article violation. Oh, the entire team is disqualified. That's all the appointees and hirees. That includes judges. Oh, I was a judge. I was appointed or hired by the Newsom administration. How am I going to get a fair trial? And I'm like in there trying to refile. Well, it can't be anybody on this list. Oh, we can't do it that way. It has to be in a rotary. It's a conflict of interest. Nobody on this list because can handle these cases because they're disqualified. It's mandatory article rules of the United States Constitution. It's the way it works. So here I am trying to get proper assistance in court. It's a nightmare. Talking to attorney, I forget, the first 70, 80 attorneys I talked to, they're just like, man, we want nothing to do with that case. And I'm like, you need to tell me straight out here. Don't tell me this ain't a good case. I know what kind of facts I just turned over to you. I know how good the case is. It's also worth a whole lot of money, big money. The truth is they're afraid. They're afraid. Can you imagine that? They're afraid. There's just no excuse for this. And it's like, you need to confess. Why don't you just do me a favor, man? Look me straight in the eye. I'm looking you straight in the eye. Why don't you just tell me the truth? You're afraid for your future career, possibly your life, your kids' lives or their careers or whatever. You don't want to get blacklisted, whatever it is. Just admit that you're afraid. And there was a number of them. Yeah, we're afraid. It's too big of a case for us. These syndicate people, it's too big of a deal. Other people, they wouldn't admit it. I could see it in their eyes. I could see it in their body language, and they didn't want to admit it. Prosecutors, trying to get prosecutors to get in on this. Let's go through some processes. No, same thing. You pass dynamite material in it, and they're just trying to make excuses that they can't see the connectivity. I don't understand that kind of law. And yet, okay, but meanwhile, I have to keep dealing with people that are not just violating my civil rights, they're attacking me, an archiver, with erroneously developed information. I think, well, I'll just say it. I've had a total of 4 false arrests in Riverside. But here's the thing. The sheriffs and the cops in Riverside are like really, really pissed off at the state of California. They're really tired. They're really tired of this kind of crap that the state of California has been doing. These kinds of, here's your latest deal. These are the new policies. You have to do this. And they read those policies and they're like, this is illegal. And it gets worse. It gets to the point where you literally have sheriffs in the field that know that these laws and the way things are being managed, it's destroying people's lives. People can't function. And these sheriffs are like, I can't, it's not my job. I never signed up. I never signed up to violate people's civil rights for this regime in California. That ain't part of serving and protecting. That's not what it's about. So they're pissed off. They won't even necessarily handle things the way they're perhaps being told. By, oh, well, this is the law now. No, it's not. And they're going to say, well, I don't have to do that. So that's a little leeway. That's a little leeway. I thought I'd bring that out in honesty because you've actually had Chad talk about that. There's a level that Chad mentions it, and it extends beyond what his base statements. Which is interesting. But, I thought I'd bring out some of this to get some of this definition because there's people that are not understanding the law. And they're not understanding that we have a master imprisonment of people's devices of their phones. All these voters have been electronically kidnapped, and they're having false narratives forced on them. We don't have an election. This is not a valid election. As far as the article stuff go, we're backlogged. There is no statute of limitations to what they've done. There's no such thing. It can't ever occur. They've committed treason. More than 3 million charges. Various types of charges, including treason. 7 major people are facing mandatory death penalty charges. Voters. This is not a game. It's not a game, and I'm doing everything I can to understand that many of you are frustrated. I understand this, and I'm asking you, can you still remain calm? People who basically we had helped in the past in the archive doing a little bit of references to get them to attorneys and whatnot. Can you remain calm? Because we did have materials that were archived in the archive that have been destroyed. And some of these people, they may not react very well. I'm not their brother's keeper. I'll say that right now. I'm not their brother's keeper, and some people can react badly. I have personally understood this at a close level. Myself, in one of my filings as a presidential candidate out of Arkansas, I had somebody that really loved my websites. They really loved my campaign. They couldn't believe some of the issues that I was on. I had a wider range of issues. I even had issues involving Cuba syndrome type stuff, and saying, yeah, there's, we can do this. That was happened with intelligence. They had microwaves on our personnel in the embassy, and that goes all the way back to Reagan, a whole lot of stuff on that. I did a lot of research on that. And it's real. We have citizens that are being harmed from foreign governments, that are being harmed from foreign laboratories, foreign doctors. They're conducting experiments on people in violation of international law. This happens. we caught a Russian with a microwave gun running around, several of them actually, but we caught one of them with the equipment. The guy's arrested, and Biden trades this guy for some girl basketball player got caught smuggling THC into Russia, so he's going to trade this monster that has thousands of people. There's just thousands of people across the country that want to charge that guy, that want to drag him into court and question him and say, hey, what's this microwave gun here that the FBI caught you with? What is this stuff? What is this? You know, where were you going? Were you around the school? Did you harm my child with this? Did you harm my child with this? Thousands of people upset around the country. And he trades a monster like that is needed to be interrogated more thoroughly so people can get closure. I mean, you wouldn't believe it, you know. I mean, you see little pieces on the news. You have families out there, and their children have been attacked. Their children's been injured, and they believe their child, and they see something like this happen. And he's going to change a genocidal maniac, a monster that would run around with a microwave gun, frying at people's heads, even children. And he's going to trade them so a basketball player that was breaking the law to begin with can fly home. That's crazy. You know, so, I mean, I get upset because there's all kinds of stuff that can happen. Believe it or not, there really are. I mean, there was a guy called up. I met him once. He worked at a Target. He wanted to volunteer for my presidential campaign. I said, okay, well, I have to do, I got different spots. The guy claimed he had enough qualifications to actually become one of the treasurers. I said, great, I'm short. I need an extra treasurer. So let's go ahead and get your security check done. And so he was going to, he filled out part of the paperwork. And I says, you understand, until this goes through, you're not with us. You're not an employee. He says, oh, yeah. He says, well, I can go down and pick up certified copies at the state capitol. I says, yeah, you could do that, I guess. So the guy goes down and he does that. And then he walks into the Democratic headquarters. Apparently that didn't go very well, people. He walks in there and somebody said something really bad, I'm sure. And I had talked with one of them before when I went down there and I says, I'm thinking of running for president. I'm just trying to decide which party to run through. And so it's like, wow, And they're like, well, you don't look like a communist to me. I don't think we can back you. I says, well, as far as I know, there's nobody else that's going to run. I'm going to go down and file. I'll be the only candidate running. I just checked, and I just thought I would be checking. So, so it's like, okay, and so I went down and I did register, and I hadn't decided exactly where the party preference was be. This one of the guy, we were talking about, I says, well, it could be Democrat, but none of that can happen until I get back from my trip. I'm going on a trip. I've got some runs in California to do. It'll get dealt with when I get back. I'll be back in like a week to 10 days, 2 weeks. But the guy went down there anyhow, and I get a call on the phone. And a buddy of mine, a sheriff, calls me up and says, Mike, we heard that you were in Little Rock and you got killed. I says, no. He says, yeah, well, the guy had a truck just like yours. I says, really? Well, I was at the Democratic headquarters, and he blew away the state Democratic leader. And I'm just like, no, that's not me. Actually, my oil pump's broke down right now. I'm in a truck stop trying to get parts right now, and he's like, okay, well, I just wanted to make sure. And I says, Bob, how would I do a shooting when all of my guns are in your safe? He's like, oh yeah, that's right. I had all my guns at the time in his safe, so it was like, kind of a funny there. Oh, yeah, okay, you're all right. Okay, it's somebody else got a truck just like yours. Okay. And I'll just tell you, people didn't hit me. It took a while before I figured out what happened. And it was the guy that wanted a job, and with the campaign, and we're going to have to finish, basically, because we were handling different types of information. Some was classified. He was going to have to get a classified rating through the government. That paper was going to have to get sent in. Was going to have to get verified. And apparently the guy went down and picked up paperwork, certified paperwork, which would be needed. And then he decided to go talk to these other people, and something happened. Something happened, and he flips out, and the other guy ends up dead. And the only thing I can think about is he walked in the door and probably says, "Yeah, I'm volunteering. I'm getting a job for the only filed candidate in the whole state of Arkansas running for president. The whole state. There's only one. I just got a copy. Here's the certified paperwork. How do we proceed forward?" And the guy probably turned around and says, "Yeah, you don't look like a communist to me." And, that probably, yeah, I would say that that probably began clicking the wrong way in the guy's brain. And if you're an Arkansan and somebody does that to you, that could definitely brush you the wrong way. And if things proceeded from there, I don't know what words could have happened. I wasn't there. But apparently he went out to his truck, and he had a gun in the truck, and he grabbed his gun and he walked back in and he blew the guy away. So that seemed to be a reality. That's what happened. Depending on your point of view. Again, I wasn't there. I don't know. Is the truth that guy was a communist spy, demanding that he'd only help communists run for office? Did that guy was he a hero? Was he a hero eliminating somebody that was a spy, that was somehow deeply embedded, where we have a situation where you can't verify that they're committing treason? Or something else? I don't know. I mean, maybe he went down there and the guy owed him money or something, or I don't know, foreclosed on his grandma's house or something. I have no idea. And again, I didn't know that guy. I only met the guy once, So I just want to tell you people that things can end up getting funny. I mean, look at Newsom. He's just all paranoid looking. He's real snappy, super weird emotional thing, talking about all kinds of stuff in a way. He sounds kind of psychotic right now. And, he's like doing all this eye fluttering. And it's like he's trying to communicate to every nut that's out there, every possible nut and crazy that's out there, that, well, yeah, we're in trouble. Well, yeah, of course they're in trouble. He knows he's in trouble. He's seen some of the documentation that I've been putting out. He knows. He's gotten copies served to him. Bonta's gotten copies served to him. The Secretary of State's got copies of material served to them. They know what's going on. They don't want to cooperate. They've never wanted to cooperate. They know what's going on. They're scared to death. They know that they're involved in a major constitutional articles violation, and that thousands of people are going to lose their jobs and their retirement because of what they did. And we have to protect the process of elections, because from a previous election, Newsom's invalid. The past gubernatorial election is completely invalid. By default, I'm the governor. I'm actually working slowly to set up an emergency governor's office. It's a lot of work. Don't have enough funding. I've had a lot, there's a big problem. I'm trying to get done what I can get done, and people just don't believe that our world is dangerous, that there are people that'll run around and shoot at you. And I'm telling you, I've watched this stuff evolve from years. I've watched it evolve for years. And if you can't see the violence being focused at the ICE agents and all this other stuff, then there's a serious problem. So I just wanted to get more of this out there, because people need to understand more about what this information means. They really do. And I just want people to remain calm. I want people to align because I've got the better solutions. So, the truth is that people who have good solutions are perceived as a threat from people who don't have solutions that want to involve themselves in endless fraud and theft. It's about what is the future? Are we going to take these criminals into custody and bring this to an end? Are we going to put back the power and allow people to be their own carpenters and build their own homes again? Or drive them all into poverty, massively increasing the homeless situation? This is not a game, people. There are major federal constitutional article violation. This is not a game. National security info. This is not a game. We have people going to be facing death penalty charges. This is not a game. I got a call coming in. I got to go. Thank you very much. Michael Crosby.